Well, folks, we have a treat for you next. We have Randy Miller from Allrite Home and Remodeling. Randy, are you there?
I am here, Jonathan. How are you today?
Oh my gosh, Randy, we have had an ultimately awesome morning. I think people have finally got enough coffee in them. I know I have because I'm super jittery. So I think we're finally at that point where we need to talk about, hot air. What do you think?
Hey, I like the reference about referring to me as hot air, buddy. I can tell that we have that good back-to-back rapport, so I'll return the favor sometime.
Excellent. So, Randy, what are we going to be talking about today?
Yeah. Well, let's start with talking about, I know, your nonprofit organization that you end up having, you're talking about healthiness all the time. Everything about it has to do with healthiness in the home. And would you agree that air movement has a lot to do with it?
I would agree 100% with that. I think when we think about airflow, air movement, even the ventilation that we talk about, one of the things that we start off by talking to people about is making sure that we know where the air is coming in your home. So in order to do that, we have to make sure that the attic is completely separated from the main space so that we know that we're not getting any leakage that's coming into that house. But by doing that, we also want to make a safe environment for that attic space. So, wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. So let's start this conversation about talking about the different types of ventilation as far as inside the house and also air leakage from in the home. There's the whole home fans, there's the bathroom fans, there's all sorts of different things in the home, but we also are really, really concerned about making sure that the air isn't seeping through different areas. And so with the insulation division of my company, we're real concerned about making sure that we do the air sealing properly so that it's going out of the house in a controlled manner. You and I have had conversations about making sure that it is truly in controlled versus leaking into the attic or into areas that you really don't want to, right?
Oh, yeah. That's actually key in order to creating a healthier environment so that we can use other systems to actually clean that, knowing that we're not putting those systems under extra stress because they're getting air they shouldn't be getting.
Exactly. So, and then once it's out of the envelope, where is it going to? So I think what I want to end up discussing or going into a little bit of detail is where it's going out to. Let me show a bunch of different examples now, and you and I are talking a little bit more about the attic ventilation. You can ask any questions you want to about attic ventilation towards the end of this. All right?
Sounds good, Randy. I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'll check back with you a little later.
Sounds good. Thank you. So first and foremost, bathroom fans that end up going from obviously your bathroom out, and the connections that are in there. Be very careful as far as with how that is venting out. We don't want that seeping into the attic, causing microbial growth in the attics and like Jonathan had stated before, potentially could end up weakening your roof where it has to get replaced sooner rather than later. The other areas, we want to have those airflows that are going. So in a typical home, hopefully this shows up well, you've got your intake ventilation that's down low and your exhaust venting usually that's up on the high points. Balance is important when you're talking about ventilation. If you end up having more exhaust venting than you do intake vent, instead of seeing the arrow go upward like you see here, it goes downward instead, potentially causing a problem inside the attic. But not every home has this exact example where you can have your standard typical soffit ventilation and your ridge venting. So I'll show you different examples. But to start off, let me explain the top portion of the venting, because obviously that's easy to explain as far as how it goes out. Sometimes you'll see gable vents on the side of the home that can end up working. But like I had said, the balance is important. You want to make sure that you have more venting coming from inside the house than the exhausting. But your exhaust venting typically can be a ridge vent, and this kind, we put shingles over the top. It's got the external baffle to it plus internal baffling as well, so that you're not going to have nearly as much of that back drafting or drafting inside to it. It's allowing it to expose and go outward. These areas in here are so as well you don't have any rain potentially coming in, so it protects it very well as far as from air or water leakage coming into the house. The other very common ventilation ends up being panels like this that you see on the roof. They may end up being square, they may end up being angled like this, but it's not uncommon to see these. Typically though, you want to make sure that there's enough of an opening so that that airflow does end up coming out and through. One drawback that we do see with some of them, not nearly as much with this one that has the opening here, is birds have a tendency of nesting up in there. It's not the best thing to end up having, because that obviously ends up fooling around with how much airflow you can actually get into your house and out again into that area. So just understand that's and options that are out there, but they're both really good, but it's all about the balance. So now the key thing is the intake ventilation. Your most common style are ones that have holes cut into it. They can be little tiny circled ones, but as long as you've got enough air circulating in from down low to the exhausting on high. The one thing I will end up cautioning as far as with soffit venting is make sure that there are baffle chutes wherever these openings are, because otherwise you can end up getting a wind wash coming from down below if you get a good wind, and it could actually just not push it up high and out. It could be right along the wall edge. I've seen examples inside where the drywall area is where you'll see microbial growth, mold, growing in those areas because of condensation of the hot and the cold between the inside of the house and the out. Other examples of your traditional soffit vents, here's the square ones that you can end up using. These can be painted. One thing that does end up happening when you have painted soffits and aluminum panels all the way through is that when painters come through and paint it, they could close up these openings. So you want to make sure that that's keeping open and that the airflow itself is allowed to end up coming in, because otherwise, again, the balance could end up being off between your intake ventilation system and your exhausting ventilation system. One that we like to use is one more like another example, different types of hole patterns. Some of them, the times you'll end up seeing them where this is a vented panel. Now you got solid, 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 and then another vented panel that's in there. Another option that, like I was saying, that we like to use is this is a fully hidden vented system. So what we do is we'll cut in continual venting into the soffit. Again, make sure it's baffle chuted on the attic side, and also wrap around it so that there's nothing that's keeping low. And then we'll use the ridge vent on the top. Now you're maximizing your intake ventilation system and your exhaust venting system. So effectively, these things work real well. Nice clean look to it on top of it, as you can see. And that way it's basically pretty much maintenance free. Now, there are so many of the homes that are out there, though, that really don't have your traditional soffit panels. So we have to come and be creative on what we can end up doing so that you still get that airflow and avoiding problems. A couple of examples that we can end up doing is this is actually a fascia and can be used as a regular fascia board. It gets cut into the back so that that airflow ends up going in on the face itself. Tudor style homes, this is perfect for, because it still allows that to end up going up high, and then it's open in the bottom. This is netted so that bugs can't get through it. Can they end up forming nests? Yes. I mean, it's a maintenance thing that you still have to end up keeping an eye on, but at least you've got the functionality, so you're avoiding roof problems, health problems, all sorts of different things. Ice damming situations get caused if you don't have proper venting on that way. Couple of other examples that we end up using, which is kind of cool, and it works really well if you're needing to replace your roof and you know you don't have proper airflow, is on the roof itself, we can end up cutting in a continual run strip onto the roof down low. And paneling systems like this can be placed on. The shingles go over the top after we ice and water shield this whole thing. And then the airflow ends up coming in through there and then up underneath your roof board and then up and out through the ridge venting. There's different styles. There's this corrugated one as well. They both work really, really well to help that airflow. And again, to make the home healthier so that nothing's being trapped inside. Yeah, it's an ongoing situation. And I know, Jonathan, with your organization, you look into those kinds of situations and diagnose them and help people understand how to end up working better on getting a healthier home and having everything that's going to work better for the human being, for the functionality of the home itself, and avoiding current problems or future problems, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, it's quite a thing that we're trying to work on here, isn't it?
Yeah, but what's nice is every day it seems like there's new technology that's coming out to make our jobs easier to help with the problems that are out there. I mean, that's what we do. We problem solve, don't we?
I mean, it seems, well, and if it's problem solving or it's just actually more information to create better solutions for issues that we're now aware of. And what I tell people is it's not like these things weren't around before. I think you made a comment earlier about it's more awareness of they're there, but now technology is now we're starting to develop technology to test what's there. But the struggle right now is figuring out the baseline. I think, Randy, that's kind of where I think ventilation has been around long enough that you guys have an ability to create that baseline to know we're pretty sure in the Milwaukee area, in the Midwest, how to attack ventilation. Because would you say that ventilation is different across the United States?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, climates versus the cold climates, humidity, higher humidity areas, lower humidity areas, it's all affected differently in comparison. There is one other example I forgot to end up bringing up completely. That's the scenario. And yeah, you could I'd like your opinion on this as well. For the homes that they use what's referred to as a roof, where you really don't have attic ventilation system going on at all. Basically, the idea is to choke off all intake and exhaust venting, giving it a blanketing. And now it's even more important for the in-house ventilation systems to end up working better. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting comment, because I think how many times have we run into that scenario where you got that cathedral ceiling that isn't based on trusses, which means you get some room to work with there. It's all just the old rafter systems, and people are like, well, I want a cathedral ceiling in my living room, but I got these old rafters that are just 6 inches thick. I mean, how many times have we had this discussion? Like, well, I mean, what are your solutions here? And you always kind of cringe a little, I think, don't you?
Well, I mean, you figure it out. And with our company being a roofing and an insulation company, it's a lot easier to end up working on the outside of the house to figure out those problems rather than from the inside and having to end up tearing out drywall or to end up sealing everything out from the inside. Although I know creative construction would be happy to end up doing all the repairs on the inside of the house. But it's easier for us to be able to just tear off the roof. We can use closed cell spray foam, get an R value of 7 per inch, and in those little cavities, we can give sufficient amount of insulation so it's blanketed well and you're not having a condensation problems on those rafters. I know your staff, Ashley, definitely would appreciate well-insulated attic at the home that she's in the process of working at, since I've been out there.
Yeah. Yeah, she's. I mean, I think it's a
So,
very common thing, right? Buying and selling, you're kind of running into scenarios. I mean, she's in the process of buying a house, and she ran across mold too. That's a huge issue when we talk about improper ventilation. Now you actually lead to
right.
other problems that are going on. Hey, Randy, I wanted to touch base real quick. We're almost out of time here. But I was at a house the other day, and maybe I think people can look at their own roofs and kind of analyze this. I was at a house that over the cathedral area, all the shingles were buckling and crumbling. And then as we looked down the roof line, the other half of the roof seemed just fine. And I was trying to explain to them, I believe it's the ventilation issue that is causing that with the shingles. Could you touch base on what's happening there?
Yeah, it could end up being the ventilation situation that was going on, just like we were talking about. Heat rises inside the house. If there's not an area that's in there that's well insulated, that's allowing that heat to go right underneath and potentially causing the damage to the shingles. The other thing it could be doing is staying damp because of that hot, cold, a lot more so than other sections of that roof. And that happening, when you keep a shingle damp, it's deteriorating it a little bit more so, almost like in areas that have algae growth, because it's an intersection that's also keeping damp on a roof. So it's unique. It's interesting to end up looking at a shingles, and you can see some of the different scenarios that might be going on. It also could be a bad batch of shingles. So we look, we figure it out, because we could get one bundle of shingle that it just has an issue, and then the rest of them are fine. So it's any number of things that we'll end up taking a look at, figuring out, and do what's going to be best for the homeowner and what's going to end up long lasting wise being best for the home.
Well, excellent. Well, Andy, that was all kinds of fun and excitement. Thanks. I mean, I think ventilation is one of those things that we all think we know about, and we actually know very little. So thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it.
It's not one of those sexy things like some of the remodel projects that people end up doing. But it's a very important thing.
We'll get some other time. Thanks, Randy.
Take care.